What's going on, everybody? So you're looking to buy your first truck, and that can be extremely overwhelming. Well, in this video, I'm going to share the top 3 things that I really couldn't find a whole lot of research about. However, I really wish I had known. So stick around. So this is my first truck, and I've had her for about 2 years now. 1 more year left of payments. Woo! And yeah, that'll be a beautiful day. But anyway, I digress already. Anyway, buying your first truck is a heck of a task, and there's so many things to learn before you go out and make this huge purchase that can really make or break you. There's a lot of things that I would say matter, but they won't make or break your decision in what truck that you should buy. Like, for instance, what type of truck you should buy. That's more of a personal preference, and by type I mean Kenworth, Peterbilt, Freightliner, Volvo. That's kind of like, whatever floats your boat. Once you get to the engine, that makes a little bit more of a difference. And then specifically when you get into the years and all of these things, but there's a lot of research about all of those topics that I just talked about. But the 3 topics that I'm going to cover today, there's just really not a whole lot on. We're going to start right here. I know you guys love the big blue stick. But the transmission is going to be point number 1. Point number 2 is going to be the wheelbase, and point number 3 is going to be the gear ratio. And of the 3, hands down, gear ratio is extremely important. And it's something that is kind of difficult to find research on. So I figured that I would share with you guys, those 3 things, kind of my thoughts about them, and, kind of what application fits best with the differences in between the 3. So let's start here with the transmission. Now, my transmission is a 10-speed. That's probably the biggest disappointment that I have with my truck, but it's not a make or break issue. If I were to find my dream truck and it had every single thing, but it still had a 10-speed transmission, I might consider the purchase. However, I highly recommend that you get either a 13-speed or an 18-speed. And for a couple of different reasons. One, resale value is going to be much better on the 13-speed or the 18-speed because owner-operators tend to look for those, because the more gears that you get when you're running, let's say you're either running heavy or you're running through the mountains. Those are going to be the 2 applications where the transmission is going to matter the most. It's a lot better to have more gears to choose from, because then you don't have to drop as many gears, and you'll be able to pull those hills a lot better, so you'll be able to get through them faster, and you'll be able to get through them at a better mile per gallon rate. Yes, it does actually affect your miles per gallon. So, yeah, I wish that she wasn't a 10-speed, but, transmissions aren't exactly cheap these days. So we're going to ride the old 10 till she dies. But I highly recommend that you go with either a 13-speed or an 18-speed when looking for a transmission. All right, we had to put the sunglasses on because, I'm in Phoenix and the sun is just blazing. Which, by the way, I've seen a lot of people have actually purchased the Edge eyewear sunglasses that I did a video on a while ago, but months later, I still love them. So you guys are considering buying them, they are very durable and they work really well. So just kind of wanted to update you on that. But anyway, now we're moving on to the wheelbase, and that's my truck behind me. She is a little dirty, she needs a bath, but it is what it is. She works for a living. She doesn't look clean for a living. Hopefully that'll change soon, but we're working on it. Anyway, my wheelbase back there is 242, and that, to me, for flatbed or any kind of open deck, that's a little short. There was a gentleman asking about wheelbase, and someone told him that when you go open deck that you want the shortest wheelbase possible. Well, to me, that's just
completely wrong. And that's my opinion, because, you know, obviously a lot of this is going to be opinion based. But the longer wheelbase you have, the more smooth ride you're going to get. And because open deck, a lot of times, you know, that you know, in the back you've got that split axle. Well, you're going to be pulling the load rather than hauling the load, which means that you're going to have more weight on the back on the trailer than you are on the drives. And that's going to cause a very bumpy ride. If you've ever pulled a coil, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But the longer the wheelbase will counteract that offset weight back there, and it's going to give you a much smoother ride. So when you're talking, if you're looking for a truck to perform open deck, you want a longer wheelbase. Now, if you're looking to pull a box, whether that be reefer or just drive-in, you really don't want to get too long on the wheelbase, unless you're kind of a hobby trucker or that's just something that you want. But if you're looking to make your tool, your truck, the most efficient that it can be, well, then you want a shorter wheelbase. And what that's going to essentially do is that's going to it's going to make smaller the gap between the back of the truck and the actual trailer. When you're pulling a box, obviously you've got this big square thing, rectangular thing running down the road, and that acts as a huge windshield. So the bigger wheelbase you have, that more separation you're going to get, and the worse fuel mileage you're going to get. But it doesn't really affect flatbed too terribly much, so the longer the wheelbase, kind of the merrier. I would say on average, 260 is a solid wheelbase. You know, just kind of in general, if you don't know what you want to do, you can't really go wrong with 260. This 240 back behind me is really cutting it close. You can see my headache rack right there. And whenever I go to turn, you know, my trailer gets very, very close to my headache rack. So the 242 is a little tight, I would say, for comfort reasons and just a little bit better quality ride. I would say 260 on the wheelbase. If you don't know what you're gonna do, that's not gonna create too terribly much separation between your truck and the trailer. But I will say this, my 242, if you know you're gonna drive a box, is a pretty solid wheelbase. I got excellent fuel mileage whenever I was running the UPS runs, and I was going a little bit faster than I should. I was running 68 to 70 miles an hour when doing that, but I was still getting 7.8 miles per the gallon. So, you know, it's a little bit, it's one of those things that you can't really go right or wrong, but just know the longer the wheelbase, the smoother the ride. But pulling a box, you're gonna get more wind drag, so keep that in mind. And lastly, let's talk about what is the most important spec that you probably didn't find a whole lot of research about, and that's gonna be the gear ratio. Now, the gear ratio can really make or break your truck in what type of fuel mileage that you're going to get. And this is something that you should put a lot of thought towards, and you should really put a lot of research into. And ideally, you already know the application that your truck is going to be put into, whether it's mountain driving, a lot of stuff below Interstate 40, you know, if you're gonna be pulling heavy, if you're gonna be pulling light. All of these things make a big difference in what gear ratio you want for your truck to make it the most efficient. And, you know, it's one of those things that, like for instance, let's talk about my truck. My truck's a little bit different. It has a different style transmission. It has what's called a 1-to-1 transmission. So for every one time that my gears are rotating, my engine rotates one time. And that's how I get away with having an oddball gear ratio of 253. That's something that I'm not a huge fan of. And I was a little bit skeptical getting this truck simply because of that. But it turned out really well. You know, I get great fuel mileage. I don't have any issue pulling hills. This last load I was on was very heavy. I think I was a little over 79,000 pounds, and I was maxed back here in the back. So yeah, I had some troubles getting up the hills, but overall it wasn't too bad. And you know, it's the lower number means the taller the gears. So my 253s, let's say I didn't have a 1-to-1 transmission, that would mean that my gears rotate 2.5 times for my engine rolling over once. I believe that's how that worked. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure. Anyway, kind of your standard gear ratio is going to be 355s. It's been around a long time. That's going to be the gear ratio you're going to find the most out in trucks when you're looking to purchase trucks, unless you get something like this one that was ordered for a very, very specific purpose. But 355s are kind of the typical gear ratio, and they're one of the best as well. That 355, if you couple that with the tire size, now gear ratio and tire size are going to go hand in hand, so pay attention. The 355 gear ratio, if you have that in the truck, you're going to want 24 5s as your truck tires. And don't know why, but obviously it has something to do with the amount of turning that it gets, but that's going to be the best as far as pulling power and fuel mileage. Also, 336 is going to be the other top gear ratio to consider. And with 336 gear ratio, you're going to want 22 5s on the truck. Once again, not 100% sure why, but I do know that Peterbilt Steve, he specs a lot more trucks than I do, and he's done a lot more research in it than I have. That's where I get my information from, and he gets his information from Peterbilt, so pretty sure he knows what he's talking about, and that's what he recommends. So it's dependent on what size tires you have, and I would go a little bit further. If you're gonna do a little bit more highway driving, if you're gonna be a little bit more flat, I would say go with the 336s. If you're gonna be an open decker, or if you're gonna be in the mountains a lot, I would say go 355s. This is assuming that you're gonna be pulling heavy the majority of the time. So if you're gonna be pulling, look at it a different way. Let's look at it by weight. If you're gonna be lighter, go with the 336s. If you're gonna be heavier, go with the 355s. If you're doing heavy haul, you probably know what you're doing, and you're not watching this video to learn about gear ratios. You know, you're probably getting 379s, so just thought I'd throw that in there. But you know, gear ratio will absolutely make or break you. If this is something that you ignore and you run out there and you buy 264 gear ratio, but you do a lot of mountain driving and you're heavy, you're gonna get terrible fuel mileage and it's gonna break your bank. You know, so really pay attention to this. This is something that's extremely important when it comes to miles per gallon, when it comes to putting more money, or I should say keeping more of that money in your pockets. So I hope you learned something today. If you did, hit that like button. If you have comments about any of the 3 topics that I covered today, and you maybe know something that I don't, leave that in the comments down below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you, oh my gosh, so much. Just do all the things. And don't forget though, stay driven.